Hello, welcome to That VidBlaster Guy. I'm Tom Sinclair, that VidBlaster guy, and want to welcome you to another show today. It is Wednesday, May 29th, although the shows, we don't really keep track of which show is which date and how many shows we are into it. We live in the present here on That VidBlaster Guy, and we're just happy to be with you again today live, if you're watching us live, and on YouTube if you're watching us later. If you are watching live, we invite you to join the chat. A lot of folks hanging out in the chat right now. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we'd love to have you join us live. There's a great opportunity to give some feedback during the show directly and have an input on the show. And typically towards the end of the show, we tend to look to folks in the chat room and check out their comments and see what kind of questions they've had. In fact, we're going to invite the guys that are hanging around in the chat room, if they'd like to call in at the end of the show. We'll take some calls live on the air. As you may recall, if you've seen the show before, we try to focus on three different types of broadcasting here. One is talk shows like this one is sports broadcasting, and one is church broadcasting. But today we're going to veer from that a little bit because VidBlaster has released another beta. The betas here in version 3 are coming hard and heavy, fast and furious, as it were. And so we want to review what's going on in that latest beta. You remember the premise of this show is that one person, one guy with one PC can do one awesome broadcast. And that's what we're striving for here, not just for the fun of it, although it is a lot of fun, but also to sort of make the case that just about anybody, anywhere, with the right hardware and the right software, VidBlaster, of course, can get on the air, can put whatever their passion is out on the internet for anybody else to see, whether it's sports, whether it's a craft of some kind, or a political point that you want to make to the world. VidBlaster allows you to do that. And part of the ability to do that, let's see, I think I forgot to turn on my lower third here. Part of the ability to do that is things like lower thirds, where you can bring in graphics and where, for example, the background that I've got behind me is just a simple backdrop. It's actually a looping video, and so that video can play. But if that video can play, you think, what are the limits to videos that you can have playing either in the background like this, or in, if I was at a meeting this morning where one of the speakers presented a video as part of their presentation. And so it was very professionally done, and we all got the advantage of seeing that. And I thought it added a lot to their presentation, because they were able to pull in something that was very professionally done. Unlike this show, which is not very professionally done. I don't come from a broadcasting background. Again, if you're just joining us for the first time, this is what it really looks like. Whoops, let me get that lower third off. And then we're dropping in this in the background, and then we're putting the lower third on in the foreground. One of the updates to VidBlaster, and we'll switch over to our news segment. Breaking news, VidBlaster 3.09 is now available. And it is available from the VidBlaster forum, which is forum.vidblaster.com. In fact, let me see if I can take a second and just put that up on the screen so you can get it. One of the strengths of VidBlaster I love is its ability to do live text kind of on the fly. Let's see where this appears. There we go. We might need to make that just a little bit larger so that you can see it better. But pretty quickly we can, and if I could spell, that's the thing. It doesn't necessarily do all the spelling for you. There we go. So forum.vidblaster.com, but live text happens very quickly. It's a part of VidBlaster called the Video Overlay module, and it's the kind of thing that can produce lower thirds like this. It can produce graphics like that, and it can also produce the text right in here, the live text right in here. But anyway, that was a sidetrack. Sorry about that. Version 3.09 is available. It is a beta version, which means it's not a release version. There's some parts missing to it. I was reading on the forum this morning where somebody wanted to upgrade from 2.27, which is the latest release, to 3.09, and apparently they did, and they said, what happened to the video playlist, a module called Playlist that allows you to sort of use the player and have the player go to the playlist to find things to play and then bring them back and play them. Well, the playlist and the player don't hook together in any of the version 3s yet. Part of the reason for that is that the player, what is the video player, but it also plays audio and it also displays still images. The player was sort of rewritten from the ground up, and it hasn't had the playlist feature included in it yet, although I suspect that's going to be coming down the pike pretty soon. It would seem to be a pretty easy fix, although I'm not a programmer, so I don't really know. But that's an example of things that in beta software, that's a feature that does appear in the release software, but has not yet shown up in the beta version. The beta version at this point, 3.0s, tend to be a little unlike some of the betas in the past, I think, because they are a little bit more experimental. And that has an upside and has a downside. I think the downside is that, like with the playlist, suddenly something's broken and it hasn't been fixed yet. So you don't have software that, if that was a feature you were counting on using, that feature is not available, just flat out not available. On the upside, there's some neat new things coming down the pike, some of which, experienced VidBlaster users have been waiting for a while and are finally coming down the pike and are in their first kind of incarnation. Doesn't mean this is what they're going to look like when they're done, but it's the first start. And that's one of the beauties, I think, of VidBlaster, is you kind of get to see it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, before it's ready for prime time, and have the ability to contribute for prime time by participating in the forum and making your voices heard. If there's something you don't like, you can voice it. If there's something you do like, you can voice that. Everybody likes an attaboy. You can also say, this is broken. It's not working the way it's intended to work. And in fact, we'll get into a little bit of that when we look at the macro function here in just a minute. But the news is VidBlaster 3.09 has been released. You can get it at forum.vidblaster.com, and it may not, as if you're watching this on YouTube, there may even be a more recent beta than that. I understand that version 3.10 is in the works, that several fixes to 3.09 are already incorporated in 3.10, and we'll see whether 3.10 kind of becomes an incremental release of just bug fixes, or whether old functions like the playlist are now working, or whether even some new features that have not been discussed suddenly get released. It's going to be pretty interesting to see. Let's see. So that's kind of the news section here, and we'll see if we can go back to, let's do this, and that's interesting. Okay, well, sorry about that. I just played with the macro function today, and of course I said, me, I'm going to try something new right here in the show without being an expert at it, because I want to bring it to you so that you can see it and see how it works. Maybe it's easy, maybe it's hard, maybe it's complicated, maybe it's not all the way there yet, but I wanted to introduce you to the macro function. Now, macros, in my limited computer world, I've seen macros done different ways. I think it was WordPerfect back in the MS-DOS days allowed you to record a macro. And so you would start, there was a command to start recording, and it remembered every keystroke. If you hit the wrong key, it remembered that. And then at the end of the recording, you could hit another key or sequence of keys, and it would save that recording. so that when you pressed, for example, Control A, it would execute everything you wanted it to do. And it was a great way to fix text and to do all sorts of things in documents that were repetitive. And so you could set up a macro to do that. Or if you had a particular way you wanted a page to set up, you could have a macro to set the page up for you. And you can actually go in and actually edit the macros. Where we are with VidBlaster at this point is we have macros that you actually type in the API command. And if you recall, the API, the application programming interface or something like that, the API is a series of commands that VidBlaster understands, that you can communicate with VidBlaster through commands through a smartphone or another device, like a MIDI keyboard or something like that. And so the API, which has been in VidBlaster for a while, now is the basis for the macro function. And let me show that to you, and then we'll talk about it. In fact, I'm going to use the macro function to show you the macro function. So I'm going to hit F5 on my keyboard, and there it is. There's the VidBlaster macro function. Now, you'll have to go full screen. If you're not full screen on your computer screen, you'll want to go full screen right now so that you can see all this. And so very basically, the left-hand column is the number that represents the line number of the commands. The next column, the description column, is a text column where you can add any text you want to describe. For example, you see with number 2, I've got switch to TDS, that's my initials, and that'll be blue. That'll be the blue background, and the overlay. And there's the command for that, and we'll get into the text of that in just a second. And it's shortcut F2. So if I press F2 on the keyboard, whoops, that's great. If I press F2 on the keyboard, nothing happens, because actually VidBlaster is not the active program right now. I'm going to click the screen. Now I'll press F2. Now we're back where we should be. I had actually brought up the chat room so I could see what you guys were saying about everything, but that made the chat room the active module. So let's go back to this. That's going to be F5, I believe, is VidBlaster macro function. There we go. And I've got F12 set up to take off any kind of video overlay that I've forgotten to take off. So we'll see right here in number 2, it's switched to me with the blue background and the overlay. And the way we did that is the API command API write, API write, API WRITE. That's the command. And then I've told it that I want to write the switcher. Now, previously in the API, the switcher was given a different name. It was called the video switcher. And if you've downloaded version 3.09 from the VidBlaster forum and you've looked at the photo that's in the post about this, you'll see that the switcher actually says API write video switcher, but that doesn't work. So there's a bug in the forum in that picture, and it took me about 20 minutes this morning to just sort of figure that out. That they have renamed the module, and so of course the API command would be different. So you've got API write switcher, and then basically there's a bar or a bus on the switcher called program. And on number 5 in the program bus is a module that is effect number 1. And let me just go over and I'll click that one. This is effect number 1. This is what effect number 1 is. It's basically a chroma key that uses the camera and the player and combines both of those in the effect module number 1, which is a chroma key. And then, so we said that that's true, and that'll switch to that. And then whatever this character is on the keyboard, for me, it's the shift version of the backslash. Shift backslash kind of makes this vertical line, and that's the divider between commands. And so my second command is now AP right, video overlay 1. And so there's a module called video overlay 1, and I want it to go on. Whoops, can we make that a little bit bigger there? No. Let's see if we can get into it. Yeah, there we go. So I'm telling it on, and then true is the function. We had a little discussion in pre-show whether true and on and things like that are necessary all the time. I think they are with the overlay module. And then the shortcut is F2, and I basically just typed in the letter capital F and the numeral 2 to make that command. So when I press F2, that gives us this. It's not fancy, but it sure is handy. And that is using my regular keyboard, nothing fancy. Now, for those of you that have watched the show a little bit, know that I've been using the Korg Nano Control, and I really like that. I think that's got some definite possibilities, especially when we get to things that might take advantage of the sliders and the knobs, like the video instant replay. But for a quick and dirty switcher, it looks like the keyboard is going to have some functions. Now, the keyboard already has some functions. For example, if I press the home key on my keyboard, well, let's see, let me activate VidBlaster again. There we go. If I press the N key, that's what I get. Home key gives me that. Page up gives me that. Page down gives me that. Delete, let's see, and insert gives me black. So some of the keys on the keyboard, and I think if you have a keyboard with a separate number pad, the numbers will refer to the cameras. For example, let me turn off this lower third. Number 1 on the keypad would be camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4, which is a screen capture. I don't have a camera 5, and so it goes to effect number 1. Camera 6 is effect number 2. Camera 7 is effect number 3. Camera 8, effect number 4. And camera 9 starts over into the players. And so you can get a feel for that. If you're on a laptop and you don't have a separate number pad, then you're kind of sunk on that one. But you've got function keys, and so now we can basically program the function keys to give us the functions that we desire and that we use. For example, if you're wanting to do a lot of different things at one time, for example, let's see, let's go back to the macro function. There we go. Turn off the lower third. We can put lots of commands on the same line here and have them all executed by one keystroke. For example, you notice that I've had some overlays that have sort of appeared in the middle, and I've got F12 set up down here to turn off all the overlays that I might be using. Let's see, do we have VidBlaster overlay 4? Is that down here? Yeah. Well, I'm going to take all this text and I'm going to copy it, because that turns off all the overlays. And I'm going to come up here to this very top command, and I'm basically just going to cut and paste it in, and then put in a character to separate. And so now, when I go F2, it turns off all the overlays, brings up this, and puts an overlay over it. And so if I go to, let's see, which one is this one? Number 5. You see that my overlay right here is still on. So let's take F5 and we'll modify it the same way. And I'm just going to put in all those commands that I previously recorded that would turn off all the overlays. So now when I go, let's go back to that first shot. Now if I go to F5, it turns off that overlay. Now these obviously are very quick and simple. Got to be simple if I'm going to figure it out. Very quick and simple ways to use the API, and to, by doing it using the macro feature. I was working on a little bit more complicated macro earlier in the pre-show, and what I wanted it to do was to kind of do what's going on now. Let me turn that off for a second. So I had this shot, and I wanted it to add the overlay to it. No, I take that back. I had this shot right here. Whoops, let me get the overlay out of there. I had that shot, which is a video effects module with a chroma key, and it basically takes the video from a player. Let me turn down the sound on the player. And so as the player plays, it has a green screen. Martin K. built this for me. Thank you, Martin. And it allows me, once it gets to a certain point in this, hang on a second, it's coming right over. There we go. But that's what it looks like. It's just a green screen. So that's what it looks like when everything else is put in on top of it. So I was going to ask the macros to put this up, to put the green screen up, to overlay me on top of it, to overlay that lower third on top of it, and to start the whole thing off by recording. And so I wrote the API commands the way I thought they would be. In this case, it would be API write recorder 1 on, I think is the syntax. And, well, I take that back. The recorder tally light kind of came halfway on. Didn't come on full bright red. It came on halfway, but nothing got recorded. And I tried that three times, and I tried a couple different ways of demonstrating to myself that it was going to work, and it didn't work. And then I finally got on the forum and found out, oh, that's a bug that somebody else has already reported in the macro function. And I'm not sure if it's in the macro function or if it's in the recorder function, but either way, it wasn't working. And so I was not able to start my program with that. And I thought, well, that would be really nice, because then I can cue everything up to one keystroke, and away we go. And then I don't have to remember to press. Has anybody else out there forgotten to press record and done a portion of a show or a whole show and realized there's no record of it anywhere because it didn't get recorded? Well, something like that could probably help save a lot of trouble. One of the downsides to the macro function, as exciting as I think it is that it has limited availability. Remember, VidBlaster comes in 4 different editions: the Home Edition, Pro, Studio, and Broadcast. And the API, which is the heart of the macro function, the API is only available in the 2 top-tier editions, the Studio Edition and the Broadcast Edition. So if you have the Home Edition or the Pro Edition, I'm sorry to get you excited about macros, they're just not going to work, at least not through VidBlaster. If you shoot me an email, I'd be happy to point you in the direction of some key logging software that will kind of do some de facto macros, so you can have sort of the same thing going, but it won't necessarily be using it definitely won't be using the VidBlaster API, so it won't be exactly the same. The nice thing I think about the API, the nice thing I think about macros is that it does put the API out there where more folks can take advantage of it. And actually, sorry, side thought here. The thoughts are coming fast and furious. For those of you that are using the licensed version of the Home or the licensed version of the Pro Edition, if you have an extra PC that doesn't have VidBlaster on it, you can download the trial, which is equivalent to the Studio version, and experience what the macros are like there. And you may decide after doing that it might be worth the upgrade. If that's the case, I'd be delighted to help you with the upgrade. If you'll shoot me an email, I've got a little special discount for folks that are upgrading just for the macro purposes. But the idea is that the API now gets more use. And as it gets more use, and as the commands come under scrutiny by a lot more folks, I think we're going to find that the commands become a little more sophisticated. They're named names that make sense. Their functions are understood. I was looking at the API earlier for the instant replay, video replay recorder module, and the controller module. And frankly, I could not understand those commands. I'm going to have to sit down and play with it when I don't have a deadline in front of me. I wish that I can get more detail in the VidBlaster help. That's one of the suggestions I'm going to be making in the next couple of days in the VidBlaster forum, that the help do a little better job of helping so that the commands are not quite so cryptic, so that folks that would like to explore and would like to learn and would like to know and would like to use the API and the macro functions can do that without having to be a rocket scientist or having to sit down and invent the wheel. Since the wheel's already been invented, let's share how we invented it and share how it works so that we can all learn. And if I learn anything, I'm going to make a tutorial of it, and I promise you I'll make it available so that you can see it and use it. In fact, I fully intended today to sit down prior to the show and to make a tutorial on how to use the new instant replay playlist. But for the life of me, I could not get it to work the way I thought it should work, and the help was not particularly helpful in telling me how it should work. So it's a beta. It's still kind of in that sense. So we're going to polish it up, and we're going to figure out how it's supposed to work and how we can best make it work, and whether we need to either change what we're doing or change how the program does it. That will remain to be seen which way things go, but you just never know. Let's see. Let's go back to the macros for a second. And you can see, let's see, we're going to use macro F12, which basically turns off all of the video overlays that I've got on. But I've got F2 through F12. I've kind of left F1 alone because that's the universal help feature, as it is also in VidBlaster. But line 3, I've got switched to me with the black background and the overlay. And what that does is switches to this. So when it's time for the news segment, I can just hit F3, and we've got breaking news with VidBlaster. When I'm done with that and want to go back to the regular show, I can hit F2. And the beauty is I can, and this would be true on the cord controller, but here on the keyboard, my fingers are just more comfortable on the regular keyboard. Let's see, do I have a camera 3 shot? Yeah, I've got that shot. I can position my fingers on F2, F3, and F4, and I can make that shot and go from F2 to F3 or back to F2 without a whole lot of trouble, without even looking down at the keyboard. And so if you're a one-man guy, a one-man show, which we are a one-man show here, we have that ability to switch cams without losing eye contact, as it were. So let's see, that's going back to that shot right there. I'm going to come over there and turn off the lower third. And in fact, let's set up a macro so that we can show this keyboard shot just with the press of a button So let's go back to our macro page, or a macro shot, which is camera 4, which is function 5. There we go. And we're going to set up function 8 to be the keyboard cam. So we're going to tell it we want API write, PROGRAM, and then I'm going to look on the switcher down here and see that camera 3, oops, excuse me, that's wrong. Forget everything I just said. It's going to be API write switcher, comma, program, and then we're looking which number on the program bus is camera 4. Well, it happens to be number 4. And then we're going to say true, and that's F8. So if I press F8 right now, nothing happens. I wonder if the guys in the chat room picked it up. I misspelled API write. Now I will say I'm going to have to agree with one of the guys in the chat room earlier who said you need to take your fonts and just make them larger. So I will do that next time. So let's see if that makes it right. So we're going to go F8, and that should switch to the keyboard cam. Nope. That didn't do it either. Let's see what the problem is. Camera, oh, that's why. Because the keyboard cam is not number 4. It's number 3. There we go. Now let's try F8. Takes us to the keyboard cam. There we go. Now we still have our lower third here left over from the other one. So let's go back to F5. We're going to copy our universal command right here, Control-C. And this basically turns off every overlay that's being used in the program. I'll come all the way back to the beginning, Control-V, space, put in that spacer character, and then we're done. Now F8 will take us to the keyboard, and we have no lower third, and so we've got program keys 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 programmed. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And if I wanted to edit 6, and let's see, let's go back here. Whoops. If I wanted to edit 6 and 7, I could have that universal take out the macro, take out the overlay command and put that in there. And let's do that. We'll show you how we would do that. That would be the Canon IP cam. So we're going to come down and we're going to copy all that text. We're going to come up to that. Come up to the very beginning. Control-V, space, character, another space. We'll go to the Logitech cam, Control-V, space, separating character, and another space. So now when we go, let's see, where's the keyboard cam? Right there. So we'll go to, if we start there, and then we want to cut to another one, it turns the lower third off. So if we've got something that has a lower third of some kind, and we move to another one, it turns off. And then we also have our universal F12, turn off the overlay. So we've set up sort of a rudimentary control surface that allows us to switch and to turn features off and on. Pretty simple. Didn't take me too terribly long to do it, and if I can do it in just a few minutes like this, certainly you can. I would imagine in a sports scenario that this is going to be really nice, especially again if you're a one-man operation or a two-man operation. If you've got the ability to press your fingers on the keys and to make your switches just by pressing buttons without having to take your eyes off the field, or your eyes off the screen, as the case may be, so that you know which of your cameras is the camera that you desperately want to have show up in the shot at that moment. So that's the macro function, at least quickly. Now, again, the macro function is contingent upon the API function. So you can see I have very little knowledge of the API function, but whatever the controls are, whatever the commands are in API, they will work, and they can be executed through the macro function. Again, encourage you to download the, we'll put that graphic back up there. Actually, we ought to have a button that does that. I encourage you to download version 3.09 and check it out. If you do have a registered version of 2.27, a word of caution on downloading any of the version 3s. If you download the version 3 and then want to revert back to version 2.27, the latest release version, you will have to re-register that with VidBlaster. It's not a big deal, but it will be a little administrative, the same way you got your activation key before by sending an email to VidBlaster and having them send you back a new key for that specific PC. You probably have to go through that process again. So just be aware. Obviously, it's not something you want to do prior to showtime. I don't know if you saw, what was it, the version 3.05 maybe, whatever the first version 3 that came out into the wild. I actually downloaded it the morning of the show, didn't have a chance to get it activated, and so did a whole show with the trial logo up here in the corner. So if you don't mind that, then go for it, because you may not be able to get your activation key back from VidBlaster fast enough, at least guaranteed fast enough. Let's see, what do we got here? One other thing while we're talking about macros, and then we're going to change subjects, and that is that as the API matures and gets changed, sometimes some of the command names get changed, and as the module names get changed in VidBlaster, that affects the API. For example, the switcher used to be known as the video switcher. The output module used to be known as the video output module. The, let's see, what's another good example of one? The video effect module is now the effect module. And so if you're using one of the version 3s, and in fact it probably changes from version to version, you want to, if your API command doesn't work, you want to check and make sure you're using the proper module name for that specific version of VidBlaster for that minute, because that's a little bit in flux right now. And you know, it's like driving through a major city when the roads are under construction, and then you drive back through that city a week later. You may get two different routes. VidBlaster is going to be the same way while it's under construction on the version 3s. You're going to get maybe it's some surprises sometimes. So if you're using VidBlaster for streaming, and if it's something that's important to you that you're streaming, you want to make sure that the version you're using does what you expect it to do. There's nothing worse than getting into a point where you've got a brand new version that you haven't used before, or you haven't used a lot before, and something doesn't work the way you expected it to work. That's not something that you want to experience, nor is it something, it's certainly something that I've experienced multiple times, to say, whoops, this is supposed to work this way, and suddenly it doesn't because something has changed and I wasn't aware of the change. A little shout out to those of you that are doing live broadcasts, or that are, let me rephrase that are considering doing live broadcasts. I've had a flurry of emails sent to me, I'd say in the last week or 10 days, of folks that were, proposing to build or buy systems, proposing to put in different capture cards to use different mixers and different ways of getting to the internet. And, you know, everything that they and I discussed was theory. It wasn't anything that was necessarily actual hardware yet. And so I strongly encourage you, if you're operating in theory, to do some testing before you move from theory to a live broadcast, because there's nothing worse than making promises and having people expect a live broadcast and just simply having things that just don't work because the theory didn't work in real life. Test, test, test. I remember a situation a couple of years ago when I was streaming a soccer match, and I had actually, it was a new 4-port capture card that I was very hopeful was going to be great, and I had hooked it up in here in my studio with 3 cameras, and everything seemed great. Notice I said it was a 4-port capture card, and I hooked up 3 cameras. Yeah. When I got out in the field and used 4 cameras, I was thinking, you know, what's the big difference between 3 cameras and 4 cameras? Well, apparently it was enough difference that the video quality really, really suffered. Got a lot of dropped frames, whatever it was, whether it was the card or the PC or the cameras, I don't know, but it didn't work, and we basically had to abandon 1 camera and go back to a 3-camera shoot, because we could not make it work, at least at that point, couldn't make it work directly with the 3 cams. So, excuse me. Oh, goodness, thought I was going to sneeze. So if you're experimenting, or if you're planning on doing something with VidBlaster, planning on doing something with a new PC, planning on doing something with a new capture card or new cameras, or old cameras connecting a new way. I was talking to somebody the other day who has a really nice camera, HD cam, HDMI out, and it's currently connecting to an underpowered laptop via EasyCap. Well, that's really not a bad idea. That's the great way, if you don't have enough power in your PC, to bring in your video at a lower resolution. But they also wanted to come in at 1080p, and that would have just killed the laptop if they had found a way to connect it. So, you know, remember, test, test, test. The other thing that we talk about too, or that I talk about with folks when we talk about why things are working, or why things aren't working, actually, maybe even the better way to put it, is to think about what happens as if it were a series of links in a chain. And there's going to be a weak link or multiple weak links there somewhere. Or there'll be things in the chain that make other things in the chain be effective negatively. For example, if you have a 1080p cam and you're bringing it into a capture card, and the capture card is downsizing it to 320 by 240, you're not going to get the desired result. You're going to have a very pixelated image, because the capture card is doing probably what it was designed to do, unless you changed it from its default setting. And so all of a sudden you look in VidBlaster and you say, oh, this image, which should be just great, is really the pits. It's all pixelated. It doesn't look good. Something must be wrong with VidBlaster. Well, maybe, but probably not. There's something wrong with the links in your chain. So check your capture card, and all right, so let's get that capture card, and now it's set at 1080p. But still, things don't look good in VidBlaster. Well, there's a resolution setting in VidBlaster. The default setting for that in VidBlaster is 320 by 240. So that's a 4:3 aspect ratio of a very low resolution. So nothing's going to look good, I don't think, especially not at full screen. So that has to be adjusted in VidBlaster. Then the camera module that you're displaying that camera in sometimes will need to have a resolution setting set in it. You get the picture? So we're kind of taking our chain, and we're making sure that all the links are the same size all the way through the chain. And that produces a great result when all the links are the same size. In a TV broadcast studio, it is assumed from the get-go that all resolutions will be exactly the same all the way through. No upscaling, no downscaling. They don't want anything to be encoded or decoded or recoded or changed in any way until it's ready to go out over the airways or go to tape or whatever they're doing. And so a lot of times when you're just starting out, it's an easy mistake to make because you don't understand how the settings on your camera work with the settings on your capture card, how those work with the settings in VidBlaster. And if you start throwing Flash Media Live Encoder in there and other pieces of software that are working along the way, you can force your computer to do a lot of extra work and have actually a worse result than if it worked not quite so hard and was set up properly. Even the good old faithful Easy Cap has got some settings in it that you can adjust so that you can get exactly what you expect from your image. So make sure when you're doing, not sure how we got off on this tangent, but if you're adding new equipment to your rig, or if you've made some changes somewhere along the way and things have suddenly gotten worse, check the links. Check the links. Make sure that as much as you possibly can, that you're doing the same resolution. And that goes for frame rate as well. When you start changing from a 30 frame per second to a 25 frame per second. My good friend in England, Joe DeMax, corrected me some months ago because we were broadcasting at 25 frames a second. And I thought, oh, that's good. That'll save 5 frames a second. That's saving a little CPU power. But what was happening was that I was actually forcing because the camera was sending VidBlaster a stream that was 30 frames a second. So I was asking VidBlaster to cut it back to 25 and actually asking VidBlaster to work a little harder to give me less. And so we corrected that and had virtually no CPU difference. Streamed Flash Media Live Encoder at 30 frames a second instead of 25. And again, very little difference in the CPU. So it was a very good fix, and hat tip to Joe for that one. One of the things that just dawned on me as I was talking about all of that is that the PC that I'm using, I'm continuing to push the envelope on it a little bit. It is an Intel i7 processor, 2600K, K meaning that it's unlocked and can be overclocked. And we have pushed it first from 3 gigahertz to 3.6 to 3.8 to 4.0 to 4.2. All of that on air cooling, and in fact, I think we're on 4.2. Let's see, is there a way to show that right now? Yeah, we're at 4.2 gigahertz today. I've got a liquid cooling system by Corsair that I'm going to try to install here in the next week or so, and with that hope to get up into the mid to high 4s. And what I'm finding is that what I'm really finding is that the one man, one PC, one awesome broadcast is sort of bumping its head into the limits of a Intel i7 processor, at least stock. And so we're having to do a little hot rodding here, like we would call it in the U.S. We're getting rid of the stock exhaust manifold, and we're putting in a set of custom headers. We're getting rid of the stock air cleaner, and we're putting in a cold air exhaust. If you're a car guy, you'll understand kind of what we mean there. And the idea is that we're going to make the PC run faster. It's going to be a hot rod. It's not going to be a station wagon. And I'm not expecting this PC to be the one that I use to check my email and do other work on. So it's not going to be it's not going to be weighed down with virus protection. Windows Defender is turned off. Virtually, this PC is so vulnerable to an outside attack, it doesn't stay on very long. but it's only used for this purpose. This is why I built it. This is why I've got it here, so that I can get the best I possibly can out of VidBlaster. So that's again some thoughts on PCs, how to avoid hitting your head on the ceiling, how to keep your links all the same size so that you get the desired results, and enough of that. All right, I tell you what. Excuse me. We're going to open up the phone lines here. Let me get the phone hooked up. And if you're in the chat room, or if you'd like to make a call, we're going to post the phone number in the chat room. And so let me take a second and put that number in the chat room. And I want to encourage folks that would like to call in. Let me make sure we've got the audio set up here. And we're just going to find a little bit of audio real quickly. Yep, looks like we've got audio. That's good. Okay. Well, let's get this number in. If anybody would like to call and ask questions about the macro function, or critique what we've done so far, we welcome you to call in and have a word. Let's see. We're getting some questions in the chat room. Oh, and by the way, again, want to mention the whole concept between the taking calls over the cell phone, again, is a little tidbit that I picked up from Joe DeMax some months ago. He mentioned it in passing in one of his videos, and I got around to trying it. In fact, it was kind of a funny story. Is I saw the cable and I said, oh yeah, I need to get one of those. So I looked on eBay and I found them and got one shipped in. And when it came in, and I opened it up and looked at it carefully, and I said, why did I order this? I've got 10 of these on the shelf. It's the same little pigtail that plugs into all the cameras that allows at least my Canons and my Sonys to output to standard definition through what they call the AV port. So anyway, it was kind of cute and kind of funny. Well, it doesn't look like we're going to get any callers today. That's all right. Either that or everybody is thinking, I don't want to be the first one to call. Talking about CPU, today I'm not doing anything on Skype, so I don't have a Skype stream up. I am using Flash Media Live Encoder to send this to Decatur. It's an 864 by 480 resolution at 30 frames a second. We are streaming it at a bit rate of 800 kbps for the video and 128 kbps for the audio, for a total combined stream of 928 kbps. I did a test on my internet connection before I started the show today, and I was getting, well, it doesn't matter what the downlink was, but it was like 48 megs, and the uplink was just over 5, so I've got plenty of headroom, 0.9 versus 5.2. I could probably do high definition, and in fact hope to be heading that direction pretty soon. Looks like we got a call here. Let's see if we can take
Call
that.
from unknown caller. To accept, press 1.
We'll press 1. Welcome to the VidBlaster, that VidBlaster guy show. Who's on the line?
This is Maine Bob from South China, Maine.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for calling in. How are you today?
Good. I actually had sent some questions in ahead of time, but I know you were so into the macro world that you probably didn't see it.
Well, could have been.
So I do have some questions if you'd like to take them.
Fire away.
Okay, I did finally get the beta installed of VidBlaster, and of course this is my machine I use for everything. So Kaspersky was really being very annoyed that VidBlaster was doing something evil to my machine, and I finally got over that and told Kaspersky to knock it off. Actually, I turned it off so I could download it and install it.
Yep. Yep.
So that's good, and I've got to just start playing with it. That slowed me down a little bit. So I guess one of my questions is, as I'm starting to play with the different modules and all, is what's the best way to record the output locally? I suppose there's a recorder there, and I can use that. Is that the best way to do a test recording and see what I get?
Yes. Bob, what version did you download and install?
It's 308.
308, okay. Yes, if you'll go to the Modules command, top left-hand corner, and then go to Add, and scroll down, there'll be something called the Recorder. And that will allow you to record whatever it is that you've got going on in VidBlaster. You'll need to set the recorder up by right-clicking in the recorder and setting up a source for the video and a source for the audio. Otherwise, you won't be able to record anything. But the neat thing about it is not only can you record whatever's in your program window, which is what typically gets streamed, but if you wanted to, you could set up one recorder module for each camera and do ISO, basically capture everything that your camera captured during the course of a session. And if you did that, you would probably want extra hard drives. And you can actually tell, oh, I see Bob's in the chat room, that we've lost his audio. Uh-oh. Well, Bob, to continue, if you want to call back in, we'll take the call. If you want to do ISO recording, you'll probably want separate hard drives and then dedicate a hard drive to each of the recorders. I'm building a PC right now for a client, and we're going to put four 1 terabyte hard drives in there. And basically, here's Bob again.
Call from unknown caller.
Hey, Bob.
Nope, this is John, but if you want me to...
hey, John.
I don't know if you can take more than one at a time.
Nope, no, we're not taking calls from people in Florida today, sorry.
I can understand your feelings of inferiority to the orange state. Get it all the time.
No problem, no problem. No, I was trying to finish up with Bob's question, if you'll give me just a second.
Absolutely.
That, Bob, you can record, for example, right now I'm recording my stream. I'm recording whatever's in the program module, and then I'm recording whatever the audio is that's coming from my mixer. And so it's really pretty simple in that sense, but I can also record, basically I can record just about anything that's on the video, and then any audio source that the PC can recognize as an audio source. So if you wanted to set up multiple cameras and record each one of those multiple cameras, you could do that, but you would probably want to dedicate a hard drive to each one of the cams. So I think that finishes up. John, what's on your plate today?
Well, really just a very simple question that I probably could look up or find a tutorial on it, but since I got you here, I'll just ask you. A lot of times you demonstrate the typing, real-time typing that displays on the screen, and I think you said you use a video overlay.
Right.
But exactly how do you do that? I'm having trouble figuring that out.
Okay. All right. Let's see if we can set up a little screen capture here, and I'll show you exactly how I do that. This, let's see. This is, well, let's get rid of all that junk. Okay. This is a video overlay module. And right. I can load it with a file, and that will show me a graphic. Or let's clear that out. Or I can just type in text. So I can say, on the phone, John from Florida. And then when I click on, that text appears on the screen. Now if I right-click the module I have the opportunity to change the font, the alignment, the margin, and I can actually grab text from a different source. I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll change the font. Yeah, let me just pull that window in here. And you can see I didn't capture enough of the screen right there, but I can change the type size, I can change the color, I can change the size. We're going to make this up a little bit bigger. I can bold it, and then I can turn it on. So when it says on the phone John from Florida is now larger, and that's just a quick and dirty way of getting some text on the screen on the fly. I can put in a backslash character and then the lowercase n, and that basically bumps it up a line. So I can move it up to the top of the screen by putting in a series of backspace characters. Oops, that's one too many. And so that's just a quick and dirty way, John, of being able to put in some live text. I like it because it's easy and it's fast. And I'm
okay,
all
so
over
when you
easy.
when you typed into the video overlay that little part where you can do text, it doesn't actually show up on the video overlay screen, right? Is that right?
It doesn't show up here. Correct. No.
Okay.
It does not
So
show up.
where's it going to show up, on the streamer or
It'll show up
the
in
actual camera module?
It'll show up in the program module.
Okay. All right. I got to play with that. That helps. I appreciate that.
And also, let me see. Let me turn it off for a second here. You also have to turn it on. I mean, I can type to my heart's content here, lots of different words, but until I turn it on, it doesn't appear in the program module window. So I can leave it on and I can edit it where everybody can see it, or I can turn it off and edit it, and then turn it back on after I've made my edit.
Okay, yeah, my confusion was, I guess I kept expecting the text to appear in the video overlay window, and that's
here.
Not going to happen.
Gotcha. Nope. All
hey,
right. That's a
Thank
great
you very
question.
much.
You're welcome. Glad to have you,
I'll
John.
let somebody else get on here.
All right. Take care. All right. That was John from Florida. He's been a viewer for quite some time, and always seems to ask good questions. Glad to have him on. Let's see. I think we've got time for about one more question. Somebody's mentioned in the chat room, why would anybody want to see it as you type? I can't imagine you would. But there might be situations on the fly where you would want to get the information out as quickly as you could, and so people would want to see it as you typed it. But I agree. I would type it up in advance and then just pop it on the screen. Whoops, that's the wrong place. Let's see if that works. Yeah, there we go. Pop it on the screen as needed without having to edit it on the fly. All right. Well, we've about come to the end of our time together today. I appreciate you taking the time out to pop in and spend it with us. If you're watching us live, hang out for a little bit. We'll have a little after show. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you have any questions, drop us a YouTube comment or drop me a comment, tom@thatvidblasterguy.com. If you need to upgrade your VidBlaster, or if you'd like to purchase VidBlaster, we do sell it. You can get it in our store at www.thatvidblasterguide.com. Or if you've got questions before you purchase, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and if we need to chat over the phone, we can do that too. So it's been great hanging around with you today. Look forward to our next time together next week. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.